This is Stephen Brower from Rattler Valley Community College, and this is part 2 of Chapter 11. I do apologize. Hopefully this part will be brief. So where we left off was talking about data. So if there is an existing system that has data in it, and then there's a new system that is going to be used, we may have to deal with getting the data from the old system into the new system. And if both of them have a similar, or if both of them have the same database architecture, let's just say they're both Oracle databases, it might be a matter of migrating the data from one to another. But if the old system is, let's say, an old mainframe database, and now we're taking it to, well, a relational database on the mainframe, the data may have to be converted from one to the other. And there is a possibility that there needs its own system development lifecycle for the software that needs to be written in order to do the conversion. And it also means that it also has to be tested and to make sure that it's accurate before going on to the next piece. And sometimes there's the thought, well, it's only going to happen once, but if we have, let's say, a failed parallel, and we have to then sometime later do a parallel again, we may have to reconvert the data. So yes, there is, in the best of all possible worlds, that the conversion software is only written once. The reality is it may have to be, I shouldn't say run once. The reality is it may have to be run multiple times. But we want confidence in our conversion software to convert from one data to the other, that no data is going to be lost along the way. And sometimes what's used as a check is once the data is migrated to the new system or converted into the new system, you run a report and then just make sure that the report's the summary information is coming out the same way. Okay. Training. So something that has to be done in terms of training is, well, one is training the users on using the system, the other one training on the support staff in order for, supporting the system. And so with the user training, a lot of times what happens with systems is they will have these instructor-led hands-on training sessions with a number of users, and they will get them up to speed, and they'll do it within a month of when they either will go live in the new system or be in parallel in the new system, so that the training is sort of fresh in their mind. But what a lot of times what is omitted, which will be covered in Chapter 12, is for users that join the organization later, what training is there for that individual user. So some of the aspects of training users will be addressed in the next chapter as well. But another aspect of the training is then training who's going to actually support it, because there might be the support staff might not have been involved in the development of the new system. Hopefully they should have been involved in some way for their feedback. But a lot of times what happens with support staff is the system is dropped on them and say, okay, now you're going to support this system. Well, they need to be trained as well. They need to know what the components of the system are and how they integrate together. They'll probably rely very heavily on the systems documentation, but they still need to know what's going on. For those that are interacting with the users, they may have to go through user training as well, so they know how the users use the system. So if a user makes a comment about being in a certain module, they know why that they're actually going through that. In some organizations, and it's more so in the larger organizations, that the programmers that maintain a system might be different than the programmers that develop the system. So the programmers that are going to be maintaining it may have to be brought up to speed. So then the program documentation would be something that would be provided to them so they can make future changes to the program. Hang on a second. And finally, and this is something that Chapter 12 will address, and finally something that Chapter 12 will address is sort of a follow-up to a system going into place. And so what Chapter 12, and this is probably why we did things out of order. Chapter 12 will talk about doing things like benchmarks, and then seeing how the performance of the system is relative to the benchmarks. But follow-up also is asking the users, it could be a month after they go live, how's it working for you? How's the system working? Are you getting your job done? And sometimes, and it's a question we don't always necessarily want to ask, but it would be, well, what changes to the system would make it easier for you to use it? And a lot of times that question, some developers or some systems analysts don't want to ask that question of the users because they know that it could spin off an entire SDLC, is this whole system development lifecycle, for then going and making changes to the system itself. But that's also going to be addressed in Chapter 12 as well. Okay, so what was the final? Yeah, it's good enough.